cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Wrap, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
Sugar Chateau Desserts is a specialty bakery located in the Charlotte, North Carolina metro area. We will create delicious and one-of-a-kind treats for any occasion. Sugar Chateau is currently shipping cakes in a jar, offering a variety of different flavors in a single-serve container that can help you celebrate in accordance with social distancing. Place your orders today by calling 803-526-7895 or visiting sugarchateaudesserts.com.
The human voice has always connected audiences with experiences. Major brands all across America have trusted Cavil's voice time and time again. Conversational, powerhouse, intelligent, and sincere. That's the voice you need for your creative marketing process. KEAVERSVOICE.com. Cavil's Voice, Cavil's Voice, CavilsVoice.com. Always on, all the time.
Let's face it, shopping for insurance can be time-consuming. That's why when it comes to your auto, home, and life insurance needs, make things simple and trust the experts at Allstate. They will help you get the coverage that fits your needs while helping you bundle your life, home, and auto policies. Bundling saves you money, sure, but it also saves you time, so you can enjoy the things that matter most even more. Contact me, Tammy Haynes, your local agent, for a free personalized insurance quote. Allstate, are you in good hands?
I'm attorney Clinton Paris, and Tampa's my community. I grew up here, went to school here, and my wife and I make our home here. What makes Tampa special are its people. So when I represent someone injured in my community, it's personal. Call my office and speak to a real lawyer and not some referral service. I will fight the insurance companies to get the settlement that you deserve. At the law office of Clinton Paris, we take the pain out of being heard.
YT Productions.
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won. Yeah. I hope my team they won. Yeah. Man, I hope my team they won. Yeah. I hope my team they won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson. And you gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, boy. You gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, yeah. We represent that swag, that MEAC, and let me say, what's up to Tennessee, stay, tune into the HBCU.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Welcome to episode 104 of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast. The show that's covering the sporting HBCU diaspora and all things HBCU sports from institutions large and small. From NAIA to the NCAA, we share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture and HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs in the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We are filming from our home studios and sending a signal live to our KSWH 1230 AM studios with Texas Radio Hall of Famer Ralph Cooper in the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. With that, gentlemen, want to say hello, and I hope all's going well. Mike, how's it going out there?
Oh, pretty good. How you doing, Doc? It's just busy. We're just moving into this this year, Lord 2021. Hopefully, when the vaccinations out and moving forward, and we can get back to some sense of normalcy.
I couldn't have said that any better there when you talk about that. Charles, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Doc. Like Mike said, we're trying to keep head above water here during unprecedented times. But I tell you what, looks like help is on the way in terms of vaccines and things of that nature. So just want to get back to some normalcy in some type way.
Man, I couldn't have said that any better. I so appreciate that framework. Yes. With that said, let's start off with you, Charles, staying with you. Give me some HBCU news of the day.
Well, I think we got some breaking news here, and I tell you, it's just such a lot of news this afternoon coming out, but we'll start here in the SWAC, and it looks like Alcorn State has announced that it will opt out of the 2021 spring football season, and this is a statement from Athletic Director Derek Horn. Due to concerns and uncertainty surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic and the upcoming spring football season, we have determined opting out is our best course of action. This is indeed a difficult decision. I'm especially mindful that this will be disappointing news to our student athletes along with our dedicated fans and supporters. So Alcorn State, they made the decision to opt out of the spring football season.
It is finally official. I guess it's been one of those news that's been going around the circles out there in so many different ways, but we hadn't heard from Alcorn State in terms of official statement, and we just have it, as you put it out there, that is now official news of the day. With that, before we go into some other news, let's go back and ponder on this. Let me go to Mike before I ask him to give some updates. That's such big news. What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
Well, I think it's not surprising. I think you're going to see a lot more. You're hearing that Howard may opt out, or if they haven't already. And I don't know if it's a function of, either the virus, but it's the protocol, the cost to keep up the mitigative measures and for COVID-19, and couple that with the fact that you can't control your players outside of the sports arena. It's unfortunately not surprising. It's kind of the sign of our times. But you're hearing that there may be more. I'm I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest.
I do agree that there may be more. I think there's an update that Norfolk State obviously has get you in that. I'm not sure if there's going to be more in the SWAC. I'm fascinated to see what that is. I do think there is some information that we need to provide in there because some of it comes out if this is maybe a cost mechanism in terms of COVID-19. And I think it would be a disservice if we just overlap this in terms of a costing and lack of testing. I think you have to really look at this. And I told somebody else this earlier, but you really have to look at this between each individual sport. So for example, Howard basketball men's program determined that they were not going to move forward, but the women's program is moving forward. Yep. So not an institutional program moving forward. Alcorn other spring sports are moving forward. So when you start to break that down, then you start to understand that this is an individual program, and the uniqueness and the individuality of a program to be able to be managed through the process. And so it's not just a universal statement that the costs associated with COVID affects disproportional programs or HBCUs for that factor. And I think we do a disservice if we didn't put this out there, that this is more about the uniqueness of particular teams. Just like you see championship level teams, there's a uniqueness about a championship level team that is not always just about talent. It is also about the disposition of that team and everybody involved that is able to come together in such a way that they're able to move towards championship. And dealing with COVID, for those programs that are able to deal with it, it's not saying that one program is better than another program. It just tells you about the disposition of teams, players, coaches within that program that are able to mitigate it in such a way they can move forward. So I think that's something that is important to contextualize this because I'm hearing also in regards to Alcorn that a lot of this is also about a power struggle. And so I think we need to be frank about that since the news came out, that this is not just about the safety and concerns, which obviously are a large part of it, but all other students that are playing the spring are safety as well. But oftentimes you get to a point where there may be a power struggle between coaches and administrators. When I say that, I mean head coaches and athletic directors. Let me be frank on that in terms of what that looks like, in terms of things on the background of why certain decisions are being made versus a blanket statement for an entire program to shut down. For we've seen this earlier with FAMU, with the men's basketball team moving forward, but the women's program not. And in that decision, while it was obviously about the safety, it came down to the point that women on the FAMU team opted out. They didn't have enough players to continue a season. So they opted out as a program. You've seen that with South Carolina State with the women. When they got to a point with injuries and other women decided not to play, they opted out. So they connected that program. So it wasn't about the disposition costs associated with monitoring COVID-19 testing. It was about the disposition of what took place in that program. And again, this is not to say that that's bad or good, just to give information in regards to how to look at this between program to program, not athletic department to athletic department, or conference to conference for that matter.
Well, Dr. Cavil, let me ask this question real quick, because I guess the average family asks the question, what are the mitigating circumstances from program to program? Like you mentioned, Howard men, they opted out, but Howard women, they're going to play.
That's a great question. So like NCAA bylaws have different rules. So different sports within the NCAA test differently. That's between whether a sport is in season or out of season. It depends on whether it's a football versus maybe a volleyball. And it depends on a lot of ways, what is the physical contact within the sport? So like, for example, cross country, they don't test as often as you would require men's and women's basketball to test. So even the cost difference in testing there is different because the way that sport is played is outside, they run and there's distance associated with it being outside, similar to golf. So the way they test people in that sport is different than what you would require testing folks in football. Then there's also different tests you can take. We've known this about COVID-19. There's the antigen test. There's these tests they use that you can do at colleges are doing in universities where you have this group test based on the test of the group.
PCR test.
Yep, PCR test. You can tell whether there's somebody mitigating that group, and then you come back and have them take a second test. So one of the things that happened because of the previous administration is that you had so many different frameworks of how you're going to test people. And I'm not just saying in sports, I'm talking about overall in general, that went all the way down to sporting context, whether you're professional, intercollegiate, or interscholastic. For example, at the interscholastic level, there were no tests. High school folks got out there and there were no tests. You had temperature or high, then they might sit you down. And then they tell you go get a test and then they make a decision there. But they didn't even test. So this thing in terms of sports, programs, different divisions, all across the board, all everywhere, there are some cost components that we have to say that's out there. But I think we'd be doing a disservice again just to lay it over and act as if it was just plainly all about cost. It's bigger than that and more about that. So I thought that was important to get some of that context out there since that dialogue came out with some of the people that are following us and listening. And shout out to folks like Lawrence D. White, Kay Johnson, Chuck Hunt, Jay Mack, Kay Johnson, Thomas White Jr., Keith Martin, in terms of that, Jason Thornton, A.D., Dexter Hill, Wendy Jenkson Bishop, John Jenkins, Lonnie Shaw, Willie Alex Hine, George Atterbury, just give Carlos Brown is showing us some love today, Carton Singleton, Jarvis Austin, so Donna G. And so just wanted to get that some of that R.B. Parker, showing us much love today. Brian Echoes in the house, Dwight Moore, Fred Whitting. Man, we got them coming in hot and heavy. Tamika Newman. So just want to give some shout out for those folks that are following us in the lab today. With that, let me go back to you, Mike. And what are some other news of the day? So we talked about women, Howard basketball, obviously, counseling season, and the breaking news in terms of Alcorn State counseling their spring season.
So I want to switch gears here a little bit and talk about bowling. A well-kept secret, number 14, PVAMU, the Prairie View A&M University bowling team pulls off a three-peat and wins the 4th title in 5 years. That is a little known fact, but yes, after a terrific weekend, they tied for first, no doubt on the lane, starting out with a 936 to 862 victory over Jackson State, that little school in Mississippi, and cruising past Alabama State, 965 to 764. And if you keep up with bowling, you know that is quite a few points, quite a bit of points. So they also dominated Grambling State, 950 to 585, after fending off a strong effort from Texas Southern. PVAMU ended up league play with a total pinfall of 18,267. So they had 4 bowlers in the top 8 of individual standings for average pinfall. Crystal Klein, average 195. Cheyenne Washington, no, she's not related, but she needs to be related to me, with an average of 194.71. Patricia Rosales at 182, and Asria Wren at 180. So PV is ranked number 14 in the National 10-Pin Coaches Association poll. Congratulations. They don't get enough notoriety. If you go a three-peat and win your 4th out of 5 SWAC championships in bowling, you dang sure should get some notoriety, some attention, and it's a shame. But congratulations again. Hats off to the Lady Panthers.
Oh, yeah, dominating fans, and great shout out there. And so much love to the Prairie View and the Panthers getting it done 4 to 5 years. Boy, you can't top that in a lot of ways as they continue to finally get it done. In COVID, out of COVID, they find a way to dominate in fashion. So great shout out there. Donna G shout out and said the meetup, the HBCU meetup. It reminds me of Dinner Jane talking about meet me at the let out. Meet me at the let out. Yeah. Meet me in the lab. This is our HBCU spot that we check it all out. With that, we're coming up on it. Give me some news before we bring in our first guest, as we will be talking about last week's signing day on Wednesday. Get you some more information there. So let me go back to Charles and see if there's some other news that you want to provide us before we bring in our guests.
No doubt. Well, we're taking a look at all our spring sports. So let's show some love to Black College Nines as they put out their top 10 poll, large school division this past week, preseason poll. Alabama State comes in at number 1. Followed behind them is Jackson State, number 2, North Carolina A&T, number 3. Texas Southern preseason poll, number 4. Southern University comes in at number 5, followed by Grambling at 6, Florida A&M at 7, North Carolina Central at 8, Alcorn at 9, and Prairie View rounds out the top 10 in the large school division in the Black College Nines preseason poll.
Oh, man, that's pretty awesome. They're pretty big news. As you got it there, shout out to Black College Nines. Yeah, I guess we're going to hear the ping of the bats pretty soon. And that time is coming for us, and that's going to be ping of the bats both for men's baseball and women's softball.
No doubt.
Getting ready, about to jump in and get BJ Jones. I'll spoil it for everybody. He's coming on board, and that's Brandon BJ Jones for those that don't know. Mike, share us your last point of the news of the day as we bring in our guest, BJ Jones. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. Kudos. Since we're still keeping the thing of spring sports. Hampton Lacrosse. This past will
he's gonna find
join.
A bit of lacrosse. That's a good job. Make sure you got that. Go ahead, bro.
Hampton becomes the first men's HBCU program to join the Southern Conference, known as SoCon, as Delaware State has been an associate member for women's lacrosse since, I believe, 2017. So it's a big deal for Hampton Lacrosse. It positions them where they need to be competition-wise, where they play the likes of Jacksonville, Mercer, other D1 programs. So this is effective, I believe, July 1st of 2021. Coach Rod Woodson for the Hampton men's lacrosse is very excited. It took a lot of work to make this happen. So here it is. They're kicking off since their inaugural season in 2016, and now they join the SoCon, and they'll play some tough talent, which is no stranger to the Hampton University lacrosse program. They played a very tough schedule last year, or I'm sorry, in 2019. But they join another competitive conference, and their recruiting class is looking really well. So congratulations to the Hampton men's lacrosse team.
No doubt about it. Way to sneak that in there, lacrosse. We're going to get it back to what everybody's looking for. I think BJ Jones told some folks that we come on the show because I done seen a couple of new names on there, so I appreciate you. We have none other than Brandon Jones, better known as BJ, or BJ Jones, is a native of Birmingham, Alabama, a graduate of Southern University. Jones played under legendary Southern head coach Pete Richardson and was part of the 2003 SWAC Championship and Black College National Championship team. Jones has spent 8 years coaching at the high school level. Jones is a writer and contributor for HBCU Game Day and has been around HBCU football all his life. I'll call him the resident HBCU football analyst just for short because he specializes in that like none other. You can catch him, follow him on Facebook, and I'll let him give you that information because every so often, particularly during the football season, he does a Sunday night live. And he has some other projects coming your way. So keep your eyes on it if you would. Follow him at Facebook, BJ Jones, because you don't want to miss this Sunday night chat because the way he breaks down football, you can tell it's somebody that played the game and is extremely knowledgeable about it. And that's why we brought him in, because we want to know. This is the lab. This is professors. So we want to know the scores. Now, everybody else out there told us who was number one in terms of Jackson State University. And while we have some folks always say, hey, it doesn't matter until they hit the field, but we're here to talk about it. And so we can't have fun unless you're talking about it. So we want to know everybody else. Where do they fit in your schematics in terms of recruiting day? Break that down and tell us a little about that. But before we get into that, say hello to everybody, BJ Jones.
Man, how is everybody doing, man? I am happy to be here with you guys. Charles Bishop got a little extra pep in the step. I see someone.
Brother BJ, how you doing, sir?
Yeah, you see him over there smiling little more and all. We can't touch him on the show now. Every time we look up, he talking about Jackson State. Jackson State. I said, man, you never talked about Jackson State that much in the last 2-3 years. Never. So you're absolutely right.
Got his swagger back.
I'll take it.
So tell us why, before we get into some breakdowns, and would love to get some grades since we talk about the lab, we're professors here, so we want to know some grades. But before we get in there, tell us why recruiting is so important to the lifeblood of a program. That sounds simplistic, but let's get into it a little more. Let's hear from the football analyst.
Well, recruiting is, the players that you see on Saturday, they got there some way. And usually it's through recruiting. It's through the relationships that have been built with the recruiting coordinators, the position coaches, and so forth. If you want your program to improve, the number one place that you have to improve first is going to be on the recruiting end. You got to have the Jimmy and Joes for the X's and O's to make a really big difference. So recruiting is a major way to get them. And also, once you get them, you have to then develop that talent. One of the things that you run into when it comes down to recruiting is you had some kids that will max out earlier than others. Some kids, by the time they're 16 or 17, that's the greatest. That's their best football. That's their peak. Others may bloom late. We've seen that over the course in the SWAC history, where you get someone who walked on like a Leonard Tillery at Southern University, a walk-on who end up becoming the SWAC's all-time leading rusher. You have some kids, all they need to do is develop. All high school football isn't the same. You have the disparities when you're talking about sometime in the coaching staff and the facilities on what the kids have access to. That also contributes to kids peaking and not peaking, peaking at different times. So recruiting is like I said, it's the lifeblood. It's where your program is headed, and we can pretty much project the trajectory of your program based on how you do in recruit.
No doubt about it. Great points you're making there. Let me jump and go back since you teased him a little bit. Let's go to Charles since he's grilling so much. Let me let Professor Bishop, now that he wants to be called, let me let him jump in here.
Well, BJ, I always take a look at the teams, at least that finished at the end in the SWAC championship. When you take a look at Alcorn and you take a look at a Southern, I wanted to kind of take a look at Alcorn first and foremost, because the thing that jumped out at me was I pay attention when Fred McNair goes out and gets a quarterback now, because all they do is just continuously develop quarterbacks year in, year out. Talk a little bit about what Alcorn was able to bring in. I know they have some offensive line starters that they're losing, but what was Alcorn able to bring in to kind of bolster their roster again?
One of the things that Alcorn has been able to do consistently upon the Fred McNair is address need. They go out and whatever they need, they go and get. You talked about the quarterback position. They got a good one out of my hometown, Birmingham, Alabama, out of Ramsey High School. When you talk about Ramsey, that program is a relatively new program. I don't even think they've been playing football. Football program has been back for 10 years. They already have a state title, and they've competed for several others. That is a solid program, and that staff is a staff full of HBCU alums. One of my good friends, Justin Madison from Miles College, is on that staff. But the young man that they brought in from Ramsey, he comes from a winning program. He has that winning pedigree, comes from a program that produces a lot of college talent. He's going to hit the ground running at Alcorn. Alcorn lost a lot of offensive line. You saw them go offensive line heavy in this particular recruiting class. Alcorn did not sign a big class. All right, they did not sign a big class. That lets you know they have a lot of kids that are going to be coming back. A lot of those seniors are going to be exercising their right to play that 6th year, going to be coming back, and they're just going to fit. They're going to plug in what they're missing, especially on the offensive line. They got another quarterback coming in. With Alcorn, what you want to look at: offensive line, quarterback, running back. It seems like over the years, no matter who comes out, those positions are constant on the head coach Fred McNair, and they brought in some good ones this year in that recruiting class.
Sure thing.
No doubt about it. I told you he's our HBCU football analyst, and he knows it like no one else. Follow this man. If you talk about you a football fan, if you're not following this individual, then you're not a true football fan, particular for HBCUs at the FCS level, and even more so on the SWAC. But let me make sure I give him full credit, because he'll break down Division II out of the CIAA and the SIAC as well. So don't get it twisted. Let me go to Mike and let Mike follow up, as he wants to be called now Professor Washington. Boy, he fucking
kind of follow up. You said, Alcorn, they recruited according to their needs. Coach Dooley over at Prairie View said, I know what I need in my quote unquote. So you've heard a lot about that little school in Jackson and all of the attention that they're getting with their recruiting class. Can you, outside of Jackson State, give me your next 2 or 3 top recruiting class based on their individual needs and, why we expect them to be the top, next 2 or 3 recruiting classes in the SWAC?
Well, they're not a SWAC member yet. But if you look at what Florida A&M did,
he said it, but.
Whoa. Under a usual year, we would be talking a lot about FAMU's recruiting class.
Yes.
But because of what Jackson State did was so extraordinary, people will forget about what FAMU did and what North Carolina A&T did when it comes down to recruiting. FAMU hit the state of Florida hard. And when you look at the kids that they signed, when you look at this kid chose FAMU over Louisville, over Central Florida, over Florida Atlantic, they convinced a lot of kids, instead of going the lower FBS route, come to FAMU. We already got this thing rolling. If it wasn't for probation, you got to think FAMU was headed to the Celebration Bowl. Coach Simmons got it rolling. He has a staff, young staff, a lot of guys from the state of Florida, and it shows in recruiting. FAMU, if we put them in the SWAC, they have that number 2 class in the SWAC. What Coach Simmons was able to do was extraordinary.
Wow. And
I don't doubt it. Yeah, that FAMU class is unbelievable.
Yeah, you talked about it. It's so nasty right now. I don't even want to jump in here, but let me go back. Look like Charles jumping up a bit. I'm gonna go back to Charles. I'm gonna hold off. I'm gonna hold my questions off. Go ahead, Charles. Go for it.
Sure. Well, BJ, I wanted to ask this question because I think this has come up a lot from a national standpoint. But the glut of players, if you will, in the transfer portal, how much of an impact has that been, especially with this year's recruiting class? In terms of high school athletes looking for scholarships and things of that nature, whereas the pandemic has really thrown everything into flux in terms of athletes finding scholarships and finding places to go. And we seem to see a lot of FBS guys transferring about all over the place. And I wanted to ask, what has been the impact, if you will, of the transfer portal?
The biggest thing, me being around high school athletics and working with kids and parents and trying to get them into school, is that now you have guys who are usually lower FBS, FCS guys that have fallen all the way down to the Division II level. And we have some Division II teams that took full advantage of that. Savannah State is one. Albany State is one. Valdosta State is one. Where they were able to sign kids that usually they wouldn't have got under normal circumstances. What has happened if those surefire guys, those solid FBS guys, have had to sit back and wait? And now what you're having is coaches are starting to go to the portal first and then the high school route. So now you're having a lot of talented kids that are going to end up at the Division II level, the D3 level NAIA, and a lot of JUCO. A lot of Mississippi junior college coaches are chomping at the bits on what they've gotten because there's no room. And then you throw in not only the transfer portal, but the extra year of eligibility that we're dealing with due to COVID. So now you're having scholarships that are not available. You're having guys, when you look and you say, I saw him play on Friday night. This kid was able to do X, Y, and Z. And you see, well, he signed as a preferred walk-on somewhere. And that's because the NCAA didn't expand the scholarships. It's still 85 at the FBS level, still 63 at the FCS level. So what you're having is a lot of kids who are talented, who would normally be FBS or FCS kids. Those FBS kids are slipping down to FCS. Those FCS kids are slipping down to the Division II level.
Sure.
With that, Mike, as we're on top of it, we're going to get into this break. But before we take this break, I want to at least, Professor Washington, get your question out. And then BJ Jones, if you'll hold over, we'll come back and get you to answer it on the other side. So go ahead, Mike, with your question.
Yeah, BJ. So you hear about all of these 3-star, 4-star, 5-star rankings, and kind of listening to your last description, you kind of wonder, has this 2-star, 3-star, 4-star ranking, has it been diluted to a certain degree? And the second, I guess, part B to my question is, with COVID-19, there's a lot of players that will be allowed to have an extra year of eligibility. Does this extra recruiting create a traffic jam in some of our institutions? And I'm talking specifically the SWAC.
You answer that. Let's put a pin in that. So make sure you put a note in there. Professor Washington, as we call him now, he's good for asking these dissertation questions. You need to mark it down anyway, because it's going to take you a little bit.
All that hate got to go, Doc.
Just joking there, Mike. You're my number one big brother credential as get a piece of the rock, as I once heard. BJ Jones, I know you're not used to the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity side, but you're a member of Kappa Alpha side, so you understand a little bit about the other side. We don't say hazing around, but you know how that's illegal now. But we got somebody that still came through that side of it, so he's kind of heavy-handed at times. This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop, better known as Professor Washington and Professor Bishop, as some would say. We'll be right back. Continue to hang on after this quick break.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids' apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Professor Washington and Professor Bishop, as they like to be called now. I don't know what has changed. Some people take this upward trajectory in life. I just don't understand it. But we have our special guest, BJ Jones. He's a writer, contributor to HBCU Game Day, and he is a SWAC champion as well as a Black College champion, as he was coached under the legendary Southern head coach Pete Richardson. But I just call him the HBCU football analyst, as he will break it down in all types of ways. As we left off, we had a question from Professor Washington, a dissertation question, two-part question, as he does. Sound like what they do on those exams. You know, you think you go get this? Yeah, now touch that. So if you would break down that answer, if you would, in terms of his questions there.
So the STAR methodology, basically 5 stars are kids who are program changing kids. They are projected as, to have an NFL future. They are steps ahead of everyone else. Your 4 stars are a few steps behind with a little bit of pushing, a little bit of developing. They're supposed to develop into those 5 stars. Your 3-star guys, the way they rate those are guys who come in and maybe they're starters by year 2 or 3 and come in to be solid contributors. Your 2-star guys are guys who are supposed to come in, and those are developmental projects where you might get a year or 2 of them in the starting rotation. And then you have those 1 and unranked guys who are supposedly kind of your special teams and your role players. This is the thing when it comes down to stars. Sometimes stars are impacted by where you go to high school, not always what you've done, but where you go and what camps you go to. Because I'm here to tell you, I've seen a lot of 3 stars on Friday nights and 2 stars make some guys who were supposed to be 5 stars look really, really bad.
Why I asked the question?
Especially when you start talking about in the playoffs. When you start getting into the playoffs, and you start seeing those guys that are seniors who have that mentality that every time I step out, this is a job interview for a collegiate coach. You see a lot of those 2-star and unranked kids don't make 5 stars look really, really bad in individual matchups. So sometimes that's influenced by which camps you go to, how many prospects your high school is producing. Because you see some kids come out of nowhere because they came from a high school that maybe won 3 or 4 games the whole while that they were there, but then you put them on a field in college and they can outplay anybody. So it's subjective. People have done a little bit better by it. I came out of high school in 2002 when Rivals was first bringing that around. I didn't have any stars. I had no stars. But like I said, there were a lot of kids that on Friday night that was supposed to be 5 stars and Mr. Football types that I outplayed. Second part of that.
No, thank you for that. CB, and just for the record, CB and I consider ourselves 4-star radio broadcast journalists. So I just want to put that out there.
Were you going to knock on the second part of that, or you want to jump to Charles' question?
No, we can jump on this second part. What was that second part? Because it was good.
The second part is: do you have any concerns with COVID-19? You've got recruiting classes coming in. Some players have been promised extra years of eligibility. Do you see any kind of issues, obstacles, challenges, maybe even traffic jams where, people you thought were going to start are going to start? Do you see any concerns, at least from your vantage point?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that COVID has done is really Coach Maynard knocked it out on at Media Day. He said, if you're not an all-conference guy, you're not a solid contributor, we're probably not going to have you back for those seniors. And that's going to be the case in a lot of programs. So that adds to the transfer portal. Then you also have the high school kids who are kind of in limbo. What spots are available. That log jam that we have right now will probably be in effect for the next 2 to 3 years. It's going to take some time before we get back to normal, just because of the log jam we have the transfer portal, extra year eligibility, and then the impacts of recruiting at the high school level. Because you got a lot of kids that have said, and I've talked to them that say, I'm going to go ahead and take this Division II offer. I'm going to go there, establish myself, and then I'll transfer up by the time I'm a sophomore or junior.
Question about it. Go ahead, Charles. I know you got a question you want to jump in there. Go ahead.
Sure. I want to follow up on kind of the line of Mike was asking, but BJ, what do you think we're going to see with this spring football? Do you think it will be an evaluation of the roster with playing, or do you think we will have competitive football?
I think that you will have both. I think that you're going to have a mix of both. Let me warn you, be prepared for some sloppy football. Watch the FBS guys play. It was week 3 or 4 before it started looking normal. And for some teams, it wasn't until the end of the season until things started looking normal. Yeah. With that layoff, things are going to be very, very sloppy. The game of football is one of those things where you have to do in order to get better. If I'm an offensive lineman, the only way that I know on this particular formation or on this particular package, should my split be, a yard and a half, this guard next to me, does he take wide steps? Does he take choppy steps? All of those things that need to be worked out, they're not able to be worked on because of COVID. So be prepared for some sloppy football, number one. But then you're going to see coaches who want to be evaluate kids, and also that competitive nature is going to take over. We're competitive beings. When you play in any athletic endeavor, you're going to want to go at it. So I think you're going to see both. My prayers is that hopefully we're able to get through this most of this, the games in the season played, because we're seeing basketball really take a hit right now.
Yeah, great point. I want to kind of follow up on that. Obviously, the big news of the day, breaking news of the day, was Alcorn State finally stated what many of us had heard to the tea leaves in regards to them not participating in spring football. We've heard that earlier from North Carolina Central, FAMU, just recently Norfolk State as well. Obviously, one of the first to do it was Bethune-Cookman. Based on what you just said, do you think not playing this spring, although they'll probably have some type of spring football, do you think not playing this spring is going to hurt or help those programs coming back in the fall?
Honestly, I don't know. It's unprecedented. I think as long as they go through and have a regular spring camp like they would normally, I think that will help them out a little bit. But there's nothing like going against live bullets. Scrimmages, I know that we can make scrimmages live. There's nothing like going against someone else who don't know your tendencies, that don't know what you do. When you're in spring ball, I am guilty of this like any other player. I knew the offense was running because we had ran against those plays. I know when they go in this formation, what's coming, what to look out for. When you take that element away and you're going against somebody else with a different uniform, now you have to really go out and ball. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the fall. I do think they will be a little bit behind just because they're not going against live ammunition and they're going against familiar foes, and you starting to learn tendencies of guys that you practice against every day.
All right. I teased everybody enough. Let's go to your top recruiting classes. Let's go with Division II.
And
You can include NAIA. Give me your top 3 or top 5, whichever you want to do in terms of Division II, and obviously you include NAIA Langston if they happen to be in there. But give me those programs now. Start at the bottom.
In Division II, I had to start off with Winston-Salem State. What they were able to do, they were able to pull a lot of kids out of the Charlotte area, out of that area, and a lot of kids with a lot of winning pedigree. So I like what they did. And the 4th spot is Tuskegee. Tuskegee hit the state of Alabama hard. They didn't bring in as many JUCO transfers as they usually do, but one of the things that they did was they locked down the state. Number 3 was Miles College. They got a lot of talented kids out of the Birmingham area. We talked about the Ramsey program. Hardy, the defensive end from Ramsey, defensive end outside linebacker. I had him projected to probably go, to an FCS school. He follow him on Twitter, had a lot of FCS offers and a few FBS offers. Falls all the way down to Miles College. They got a good one. Number 2 would be Albany State. What the Rams have done. They are loaded. Albany, as they call them.
Albany, as they say it.
Yeah. But the number 1 class, man, as far as HBCUs at Division II level, Savannah State.
What?
I made this statement on the Carlos Brown show. Savannah State, when you look at prospect for prospect and the kids that they were able to pull, Savannah State out-recruited some SWAC and MEAC schools. They took full advantage of the log jams and everything that you have to do with COVID and the 6th year. Savannah State took full effect. I mean, they took advantage of that. And you talk about a program that won 8 games in 2019, that would have won the SIAC if they would have been eligible. They're building something down in Savannah, and they're very excited. And that recruiting class shows that kids now have their eyes on Savannah State as well.
Interesting.
All
right.
Wow.
That's it. People call the big boys at the HBCU level. Give me your top 5 recruiting classes. Look, Charles look like he's bored.
I'm all ears. I'm listening.
We don't know.
What's up?
But anyway,
That look, Charles.
Charles, just tell me number 1. Just tell me number 1.
What's up with the look?
In the
so
5
start with 5 and give us the top 5 program.
Look, Charles.
It's down Baton Rouge, Southern University. They were able to address needs on the offensive line, got 2 offensive linemen from in-state, both played for state championship football teams. Those are 2 guys that I think that can immediately come in and make an impact when you look at the size and the skill that they have. In the 4 spot, Grambling State. Look out. Grambling was able to make some noise, all right? Got the New York Player of the Year at quarterback. Got him to come from New York to come all the way down south.
Yeah.
He's a young man that can compete and that can go. In the number 3 spot, it's kind of tight, all right? I got Alabama A&M and I got Florida A&M. Alabama A&M was able to hit the transfer portal. Got a young man, linebacker from Michigan. Got another linebacker from Coastal Carolina. Was able to get one of the top receivers in the state from out of Hoover High School, right down in that Birmingham area. Was able to get the North Alabama Player of the Year at quarterback, who was also going to come up there and play baseball. Young man that was committed to go to UAH and play baseball, decided, hey, let me play baseball and football, decided to go to Alabama A&M. I like what they did. FAMU, we talk about what they did in state, getting down to South Florida, getting down to Fort Myers, locking down the state of Florida. I like what they did. Look out for FAMU. They're building something. Number 2, my Lord, North Carolina A&T.
Yep.
This is the key for North Carolina A&T. They signed a running back from right here in Georgia that ran for over 1,400 yards every year that he played in high school. He's 6'2", 230 pounds, and it goes by the name of Charlie Dixon.
Charlie Dixon.
Charlie Dixon, and look at the schools that were after him, and nobody had him pegged going to North Carolina A&T. And the killer point about it is A&T didn't just pull one of those. They pulled several of those kinds of kids. And then you start talking about what they pulled from the transfer pool. Number one is impressive. What Jackson State was able to do from a recruiting standpoint, I don't think people quite understand the scope or the spectrum of what they were able to do. Jackson State was ranked 78th in recruiting when you throw in the FBS. They out-recruited a few Power 5 schools. If you put them in Conference USA or the Sun Belt, they have upper tier recruiting classes there. So with the number one recruiting class in FCS, top 80 recruiting class of FCS and FBS, what Coach Prime and that group was able to do from a recruiting standpoint at Jackson State, impressive. And I haven't seen a class like this in Black college football. I think the only one I can compare it to is maybe that 2013, 2014 A&T class where you got Elijah Bell and those guys to come in. But what they were able to do with Jackson State, man, you see why Charles Bishop has that swagger. You see why he got that swagger. He's ready to go.
That smirk,
Yeah, man. Charles ready to jump off. Now, Charles, you got him in there. Yeah, no more excuses now.
No, definitely. I mean, I completely agree with you. And one of the things that I try to implore with the Jackson State fan base is you're right. The talent is there, but be wary because nobody's going to lay down. I mean, we got some coaches both in the MEAC and the SWAC. They can flat out coach. So it's still going to be a tough road. But they've done the first part. They got the talent. They got the talent in camp, if you will. So now it's about going out and going to prove it.
Yeah, and then again, this is the thing about Jackson State. Keandre Hampton was already on campus.
Exactly.
So they were just building on what was already there. And I want to give a shout out to the coaches in the Southwestern Athletic Conference. Look at what the SWAC did from a recruiting standpoint. The SWAC was able to sign 23 stars total. That's number one of all the FCA conference. Jackson State got 7 of them. But as a whole, the SWAC was able to get 7 3-stars. You got multiple 4-stars coming into the conference. All right. The SWAC, from a recruiting standpoint, has elevated itself across the board. You can call it the Prime effect or whatever you want to call it. A lot of it had to deal with not only Coach Prime, we're talking about the social unrest of the summer, and that's still carrying over and where we are as far as the political climate in this country. The coaches in the conference have really taken advantage of that, and it's a breath of fresh air to see our best and our brightest come back to our HBCUs, especially here in the SWAC.
No point. Great point. And then when you add in the expansion of the SWAC and excitement with FAMU and Bethune-Cookman, I'm sure you add that trifecta and you really get things moving in that direction. So great analysis, great breakdown in terms of that. If you would, since we're based out of this Houston area, tell us a little bit of what you think about Texas Southern and Prairie View's class.
I think Texas Southern did an amazing job. I think Charles, Coach McKinney came in. I think he sold a lot of kids on, hey, you can play right away. And kids like that. All right, regardless of what your program is, if I can come in, I can play right away. That's what I want to do. You saw him come in, the young man that he got from out of Duncanville. That was big. I like what Texas Southern did. Prairie View is not the Prairie View teams that recruiting classes that you've seen in the past, but they went meat and potatoes on this. They got what they needed. They didn't go out and make the splash that you saw Dooley year 1, Dooley year 2. They came in and got what they needed. And it's going to be interesting to see the trajectory of Prairie View and Texas Southern, especially with Prairie View dealing with some sanctions. We're going into year number 3 of Coach Dooley. So interesting to see the trajectory of those programs, because I believe both of those programs, with everything that Prairie View has and the commitment that Texas Southern has made to athletics, I think that both of those programs can be sleeping giants in the SWAC. You're already in Texas with that produces the most talent in the SWAC footprint, Texas and Florida. So you're right there. They're able to make some noise and get some of those kids to stay home and maybe pull in a kid or two here and there of Texas kids that may have gone to other places and pull them back into the transfer portal to get them on campus, I think the sky's the limit for both Texas Southern and Prairie View.
Man, I told you he's the HBCU football analyst, special writer, contributor for HBCU Game Day, none other than BJ Jones. Thank you for joining us today. You didn't let me down. You really brought it like always. As we get into the mix, we're going to ask you to come back and bring us some analysts in regards to what's going on in the spring, and certainly we'll bring you back when it really explodes for this fall. So thanks again. We bled you over a little bit, so thank you for your patience and giving us a little more of your time than we initially said, but I think it was well worth it for our listeners and our followers, so I hope they enjoyed it. But thank you again. Check him out Sunday evening. Just go join the Facebook. He'll let you know when he's going to bring it. When he does, you will not be let down, as he's going to bring it hard and heavy. None other than BJ Jones, HBCU football analyst extraordinaire. I like to add that in there because he, as you just heard, he's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to understanding HBCU football and football in general, for that fact.
Man, I appreciate that. Appreciate you guys having me. Looking forward to doing it again soon.
No doubt, BJ.
No, for sure. Thanks, BJ.
Thank you.
HBCU Sports with Professor Washington and Professor Bishop, as they like to be called. You just heard an interview with BJ Jones, Black College champion, SWAC champion, bringing you all the knowledge, contributor, HBCU Game Day, all around HBCU football analyst. With that, I'd be remiss if we didn't get this news in here before we get into a little bit of this basketball. And particularly just coming off the heels, talking about football and recruiting class. Our condolences go out to the family and all those that were fans and followers of Bill Nunn on his Hall of Fame selection in terms of, well, I shouldn't say condolences, but in terms of his selection.
Yeah, shout out
to Hall of Fame selection finally coming to his time, which I believe he should have been in there far ahead of this in terms of being a contributor. But he helped the Steelers draft Mel Blount, Southern, L.C. Greenwood, Pine Bluff, Ernie Holmes, Texas Southern University, John Stallworth, Alabama A&M, and 3 of those were Hall of Famers, and one of them should be a Hall of Famer in my estimation in terms of that, but because of the position in terms of defensive tackle, may not get the correct love he got, and that's none other than Ernie Holmes. But just wanted to give a shout out for to Bill Nunn in terms of a legend in so many different ways, and as a Cowboy fan, it pained me that he gave me so much heartache because of what he did in the steel town up there, Pittsburgh Steelers. But kudos, really, in so many different ways. I am a fan of afar in regards to what he was able to build in those Hall of Famers. It's hard to say anything more than that when you're able to get that done. And this was at the infancy of when people were looking at the NFL, AFL, that merger and bringing that talent in, and you see what he was able to do with his talents doing it. Only a few were quite like him in terms of what he was able to do. But so I wanted to give that shout out to him in acknowledgement in a lot of ways. Let's get into the women's basketball poll ranking. There's some changes here in terms of a number one. So we got a new number one this week in women's basketball. So we want to see what your thoughts on that. And look for us to do some sports analytics coming in a second type of show that we'll bring into the forefront. And so this will be a tease of how we kind of do that. With this new program, we'll actually take games of the week. We'll do it based on the sporting season. So, for example, this is basketball season. So we would take a men's, women's basketball game, sometimes 2 men's, sometimes 2 women's games, and break them down from an analytical perspective to really go inside the numbers, if you would, of what took place in various games that we select. And we'll have an opportunity where people can poll and tell us games that they might want us to break down after the game and tell you why a team won more than what you just see in the scores. With that, let's go to this poll ranking for the women's side. Nobody dropped out of the poll this week. While there is a new number one, no one dropped out. But receiving votes, you have starting from the bottom here is Alcorn State Braves, 5-8, 5-4, 30 points as they sitting on the outside looking in. Southern Jaguars got some wins this week, 6-9, 6-3, took a tough loss to Jackson State, but still in the mix, but outside of the top 5, 39 points. Alabama A&M Bulldogs, just to let you know, they are pushing in the upper trajectory, but they're outside of that top 5, sitting at 7-2, 5-1, 42 points. To me, that tells you a lot about the top 5 programs, just how hard and tough it is to get in the top 5. Like to see what your thoughts are on that. Number 5 is Morgan State Bears, 9-3, 6-2. Previous ranked 5 stay at 5. They split with Howard in terms of what they did this week, bringing us to number 4, Howard Bison, 9-3, 5-2, 2 first place votes. They do drop a spot from number 3 as they got that loss with 84 points, but they're right there with number 3, North Carolina A&T State Aggies, who are 7-1, 4-0. Hadn't played in a while, 2 first place votes, which dropped them out of the number 1 spot with what other teams were doing. 85 points puts them just ahead of Howard Bison at 84. Again, they dropped for the number 1 spot, so we'll get a new number 1 this week. Bringing us to number 2, Jackson State Tigers, 10-5, 9-1, 2 first place votes, 87 points. Previous ranked 4, so they move up 2 spots. Jackson State right there, maybe one of the best teams playing of late, but they have an early season loss. It was on the road, so we'll get to see how that may change, because I'll be looking forward to that matchup, because guess who's number 1? The team they lost to, which is Alabama State Hornets, 8-1. They didn't play non-conference games, but they're rolling in conference play. Did have their 1 loss, but they do have the victory over the number 2 team, Jackson State. 3 first place votes, so it is close and tough, but 90 points. They jump up and ascend to the number 1 spot. So Alabama State Hornets jump to the top of the ranking in week number 6 to let you know what is going on here. Let me go to Professor Washington. What are your thoughts in terms of the top 5 on the women's side?
Nothing here. I agree with it. That Alabama State, they're edging out Jackson State. They do still have the head-to-head, but ooh-wee, that Jackson State team is coming on strong. Both teams are on 6 or 7 game winning streaks when they're allowed to play. COVID protocols don't come into play or games are not canceled. I agree with North Carolina A&T sitting at 4-0 in the conference. No good. I wonder if you could switch the Morgan State and Howard positions a little bit. But I'm comfortable with where you're at. I mean, if you look at, total scoring, I mean, it reads Alabama State player, Jackson State player, Morgan. I mean, it really is. The top 5 or 6 players in the SWAC all belong to a team called Alabama State or Jackson State. So nothing wrong. I think this ranking got it right.
Oh wow, Professor Washington. Let me get out here and make sure you say that again. You thought this poll ranking did what? Oh
yeah, I think it got it right.
Now he wants to be silent.
I think.
Go ahead, Charles.
So I mean,
I think a team that I think you should keep an eye out for is Alabama A&M. I think COVID has really hit them pretty hard, as well as with a few injuries. But Darian Lewis, she's one of the top performers in this conference. She was the SWAC Player of the Week this past week. What she was able to do, but Alabama State and Jackson State. I think you hit on something with Jackson State, and one thing that I noticed this past Monday, the road win against Southern. That was a tough, hard-fought victory for Jackson State, and they put their foot on the gas in the fourth quarter. I think they outscored Southern 15-4, and they did it without a lot of help from Amisha Williams. She only played 23 minutes in that game and only scored 7 points. So it was a rare off night for Amisha Williams, and you saw she didn't really have a lot of rebounds as well. But Jackson State's bench has really developed a lot more than I think toward the beginning part of the season. You have players like Alexis Payton and Tony Womack, Jeriah Covington, Sherelle Jones, and Tion Bowler. They've all really stepped up their games for Jackson State, and it's given them bench depth that I don't think was there at the beginning part of the season where they were still trying to figure out rotation. So we're watching a team that's really rounding into shape, if you will, as we start getting through February, as we start to get to March, that they're going to be a tough team to deal with. So really looking forward to that second matchup with Alabama State, because Alabama State, they've been the early surprise thus far. We'll see if they continue to ride it out the rest of the way.
Great point, great analysis as you broke down there, Charles. Let me give some shout out to none other than AD as he broke down his BCSN women's top 5. He has A&T number 5, JSU just number 4, number 3, Oregon State, number 2, Alabama State, and he still has Howard number 1, although they hadn't played. Well, they did play, excuse me. I'm thinking about North Carolina, but he has Howard number 1. So that's interesting. Let's get into our men's poll ranking and see what he may have there. And I'm going to go to you first, Charles, as we look at our top 5 programs there. And we did have 2 teams dropping out. So this may be interesting to see what your thoughts are. A lot of changes taking place here. Let's see if Prairie View, although they didn't play, do they continue to hold on the number 1 ranking? I see Charles has some consternation, so he wants to hear what this top 5 is, and he may have some thoughts on that. When I told him 2 teams dropped out, it looks like he wants to hear who they are. Receiving votes, Coppin State Eagles, 7-12, 6-4, with 12 points. You have Hampton Pirates, 8-9, 7-5. They keep winning and losing in the Big South, and so they can't get out of that pack. They sit at like 4 or 5, but they're like 4 and 5 games behind 1 and 2 that's running around that conference, but they're right in the middle of the pack, but just can't get like consecutive wins, if you would, to really make a statement. Alabama A&M Bulldogs, 6-2, 4-2. They did bounce back, but other teams were rolling as well. They sit with 25 points after going to Texas, getting 2 straight losses. They bounced back and had 2 big wins. They were against Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and Valley, but wins are wins. Norfolk State Spartans sit at 10-7, 5-4, 41. They had a tough loss. They are reading a little bit, although they started out hot non-conference. In conference, they're struggling a bit. I don't know if the stops and goals are not really working well for them. Obviously, not having the fans in Nichols, as I watched the game they had with Coppin State, which is an upset as they split with Coppin State the game before. So that was interesting to me. And Norfolk State and Coppin State were the teams that dropped out of the poll, even though they split with each other. So a lot going on there. Number 5, Grambling State Tigers. They're going to win quietly, getting things done. You know, their loss, one of their losses is to Prairie View A&M, one of the top teams in the country in terms of HBCU. So give it there. They have a big win over Texas Southern, was surprising people, but they're getting these wins and getting it done in a lot of ways. Got their win over Southern. Yes, Southern's struggling, but that's a team that people thought were pretty strong and still finally play some close games there. So Grambling State, 9-8, 73, 53 points, not ranked. They jump in the top 5. At number 4, Morgan State Bears, 11-4, 6-2, 64 points. They just can't move out of that 4th spot. They just seem right there. They win, lose, play up, play down, but they stick right there. And because of what they've done over the season, they're a top 5 team, but can't seem to get out of their way and move up from there. Number 3, North Carolina A&T State Aggies sit at 8-9, 4-0. They were previously ranked 2, but they dropped a spot. They haven't been able to play a while. That COVID-19 protocol is giving them a mess there. They sit at the top of that Southern division, but just can't play that many games. Although they play so many non-conference games, it's amazing how when that COVID-19 may hit your program. Sitting at 8-9, 4-0, so they still had that edge there. 1 first place vote, some talent there, 81 points, but they do drop a slot. At number 2, this may surprise some people. People may question their schedule, but Jackson State Tigers, 6-5. They're 6-0. They're undefeated in terms of that, so they just win. And you got to give people credit for when they win. You can only play who's up against you in your schedule. I hate the fact that they're losing that Prairie View trip down here to play Prairie View, which would have gave us 2 undefeated teams. That would have been magnificent to see, especially after last year when you had that interaction between the teams that really make that matchup interesting. Prairie View got it done, but Jackson State was looking forward to see what they could do in the tournament postseason, but never not to avail as the tournament was canceled, obviously. But they sit at 6-5, 6-0. More about this season. 1 first place vote, 82 points. So they just edging out North Carolina A&T for that 2nd spot. They were not ranked, but to jump all the way up to number 2 as they're finally getting some credit for that 6-0 record in the SWAC. At number 1, Prairie View A&M, although they didn't play, the Panthers still are 7-4, 6-0. I think what they've been able to show you with the games and teams they've defeated, including Texas Southern, in some of those matchups, they really have shown you that they're playing some solid ball. They do not lose at home, but that means they do got to get on the road, so we'll see what that is. They lose that matchup at home against Jackson State. What even makes this worse They lost a game earlier in the first part of the season going up to Jackson and didn't get to play that. They beat Grambling earlier, so you had that opportunity. So it'll be interesting to see if they'll get to play that game. And certainly tournament-wise with both of these teams, if they qualify for the SWAC tournament, it'll be fascinating to see what that does in terms of going on. But they're my number 1 ranked team, number 7, 100 points in terms of remaining at the number 1 spot on the men's side. Charles, what do you say about the top 5 since you were eagerly waiting to hear about those 2 teams to drop out? What are you thinking about the top 5 programs this week in the poll ranking?
Great call on Grambling. Grambling got a couple of wins there that I didn't see coming. That win over Southern was very impressive. They've won 4 in a row, and they're a team, streaky team. They start hitting a few buckets, and they become dangerous because I think they rebound the ball pretty well. I can't say enough about Jackson State. Dating back to last year, I believe they won like 14 of 17 ball games. So Wayne Brent is getting it done. It's not always aesthetically pretty to watch. A lot of turnovers and things of that nature, but they just keep winning. They keep getting it done night in, night out. Very impressive win, despite the incident at Southern. It's always a tough place to play when you're going down to Baton Rouge to try to get a victory against Southern, but they got the win. And this is, I think this is 2 years in a row now that they've been able to go down to Southern and get those victories. So kudos to them. And they have a real, true inside presence in Javis McKinnis. He's a rim protector, and he consistently leads the SWAC at rebounds. So it gives them those second chance points that we talk about on the women's side of the ball. But he really keeps some possessions alive for Jackson State in terms of what they're able to do offensively.
Great points made there. A lot of that noise in there talking. Let's see what Professor Washington has to say.
No, I echo the thought. Grambling has a 3 or 4 game winning streak. They did beat Southern, but keep in mind, they lost to Southern earlier this year at home. They did beat Southern in Baton Rouge, but they are on a 3 or 4 game streak. So jury's out for me to see how good they really are. So North Carolina A&T, it's been several weeks. So I wonder if next week, if they wouldn't, just drop out the poll, unfortunately, just because they hadn't been able to play any games. But if you look at, just pure leaders, you've got you've got several players for Prairie View that are playing really well. Cam Mack, Jeremiah Gambrell, but you also have some Jackson State folks, Tristan Jarrett, that have really stepped up. He's averaging 19 points per game, so well deserved for this Jackson State team. They're 5-0 or 6-0. I'm sorry, in the SWAC. And they are showing you something. So you would have liked to see them against Prairie View, as you mentioned, Doc, but unfortunately, this pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic, has just put a monkey wrench in several matchups that we would really like to see. So it's tough to gauge some of these rankings from my perspective. So,
yeah, no doubt about it. I guess the big thing is if we can get the rest of the season in and get to the tournament, there's a chance that you can see that matchup then. So all's not lost. When it really counts, there's a chance to see what it looks like. It'll be fascinating because you have a different type of formula that will be used. So it's not just going to be best winning percentage. It's going to be winning percentage based on you playing the number of games. You got to get 13 conference games in to even be eligible, not just for the NCAA tournament, but also in terms of the SWAC regular season championship. So it'll be fascinating to see how that plays out with the formula in terms of ranking. So there's a multiplier there. So who knows who will end up being the number 1 ranking, and it'll be a little more than just looking at records. So that's something fascinating. As we start to come to a close, I did want to give AD some love on the men's side. BCS men, he has number 5, Grambling, number 4, Alabama A&M, number 3, Prairie View A&M, number 2, Norfolk State, and number 1, Morgan State. Now, I know he does computer rankings, but I'm starting to be like Charles and Mike.
What kind of computer is that?
He is winning with defense and rebounding. George Atterbury says Morgan is impressive. He's seen it up close and seen some of those games. So I want to give some shout out there. Willie Alex saying, AD, I have NSU ranked number 4 behind Coppin State. Man, all these folks giving a lot of love to the MEAC. So we'll get to play it out. We'll see. But I think there's some good teams. Norfolk State, certainly, when you look at their overall record, they're 10-7, but you got to look at what they're doing when they get in conference play. They just sit at 5-4. It's hard for me to rank a 5-4 team in conference play in top 5 when you have other teams that are undefeated, teams 6-2, 7-3. I don't even have. I just have them edging out Alabama State. I think you can make an argument with Alabama A&M sitting at 4-2 in conference that they should be top 5 before you give Norfolk State. But that's why we have the poll rankings. That's why we're going to give you inside the numbers where you see why we come up with these numbers in a little. So get ready for that, as that will debut pretty soon in terms of the analytics, HBCU analytics, going inside the numbers, as we will give you the sports professors will be going inside the numbers to continue to do that. Look for us on Thursday as well. We're going to be trying to do a special show where we go inside Jackson State's #1 recruiting class. So follow us inside HBCU Sports. Follow us on Twitter, inside HBCU Sports 1, so we can give you some information. Look for us around the same time, 6 o'clock on Thursday, as we start looking at doing this double episode. So as we're working with Roy to help support that in terms of what that looks like. And so don't be surprised if we find a way to continue to give you more information, especially as we get in the meat of this spring. There'll be a lot of action. Yes, some teams opt out, but it looks like there's some teams opting in. So we'll give you the ins and outs, especially if they're out there getting it done. We'll find a way to give you the information. And even if they aren't, we'll still keep you updated on the latest and greatest in terms of HBCU sports news. With that, I'm Dr. Cavil. We'll be signing off shortly here. Any final thoughts that I'll give to you? Charles, let me go back to you. Any final thoughts that you want to show in terms of either BJ Jones on the recruiting class or the basketball poll rankings moving forward?
Really quick, I wanted to send condolences out to the UT Rio Grande Valley basketball team in the passing of their head coach, Lou Hill. Of course, they played Texas Southern this past Saturday night, and Coach Hill passed away overnight. So I wanted to send condolences out to UT Rio Grande Valley program.
Certainly, our prayers go out to him and his family and the players that were just on campus of TSU getting that game in. Played an exciting game, great coach game, and to hear his passing certainly hit home for a lot of folks. With that, Mike, any thoughts that you wanted to share out there in terms of HBCU news that you didn't get to say earlier, or anything about the recruiting class, BJ Jones, or as we talked about the basketball ranking?
No, just want to thank BJ Jones. Man, what a terrific job he did breaking the signing analysis down, for the SWAC and the MEAC and for Division II. Hopefully we'll get him back on the show again. Great job. And I want to reiterate, kudos to, to Bill Nunn and the family on his spot in the Hall of Fame. Man, you talking about a trailblazer, somebody who made a difference. If you look at his lineage and the things that he contributed to the NFL and the folks that he recruited and put in place, tremendous impact. It's a shame it didn't happen sooner. So I just want to reiterate that, kudos to Bill Nunn on his spot in the Hall of Fame.
No doubt about it. I appreciate you closing on that note. Very poignant. Let me give one more shout out to Vic Flair. He said, do I need to do a precision poll? Why not? Put it in the poll ranking. We like the discussion. As you see, AD puts it in here, people giving their ranking up and down. Put it in here and we'll discuss it. We give our weekly poll rankings. Like I said, we'll go inside the numbers. But we love the discussion and dialogue. So, yeah, come on up in here next week. Give me your top 5 so we can discuss it in regards to when I release our men's and women's Dr. Bill's Inside the HBCU top 5 Division I programs of HBCU program this week. I want to shout out to all the lab folks that following us out there, all the followers. Really appreciate you jumping on here weekly to give us all the news. We've heard you loud and clear. You say you want more. We're going to find a way to give you more. So continue to check us out on all the social media platforms. With that, thank you for listening to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop, better known as Professor Washington, Professor Bishop, as they like to be called now, since we are on this sports professor kick with Inside the Atlantics, man. They won't let me stop using it. But hope you enjoyed the interview with BJ Jones, as I say, the HBCU football analyst. giving you all the updated information in so many different ways. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop every Tuesday right here at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. We will look forward to next week, and we will discuss the latest in news in the lab. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, DrKenyattaCavil, DrKenyattaCavil on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Again, that's DrKenyattaCavil. Dream big and continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Charles.
Of course.
Mike.
Lecture.
Dismissed.
YT Productions.
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won. Yeah.